Yes, we do. Leaf fans, we're not trying to troll you right now. Some of you know Jack Edwards. For those who don't, the uninitiated voice of the Bruins since 2005. Is that fair enough? Is that accurate enough, Jack?
Yep.
To many in the hockey world, one of the most exciting, one of the best play-by-play guys in the business. Again, to other fans, i.e. Leaf fans, they hate this man's guts with a deep personal passion. But,
okay with that.
But he has been a friend of the show from afar for years, and considering the Bruins are in town here in Toronto, he has been kind enough to join us. Jack, welcome back to the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming in.
Jack, if I could tell tales out of school, walked into the studio, and he said, "We got a series." Your summation of what you've seen, considering you've seen every second of it, from games 1, 2, and 3. Where are we at right now? Because I'm still struggling as to where we're at with this series.
We are in a position where we are observing the evolution of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the snapshot difference for those of our audience in New England, which really wasn't paying attention to the regular season and hasn't really watched hockey carefully since last year's playoffs, is the Leafs know how to close out games now, period. I mean, they play excellent, methodical hockey when they have the lead in the third period. I think there was 36-0-1, best points percentage when leading after 2 in the regular season. That says something. And, you know, we all know playoff hockey is different from regular season hockey, but that's the most profound difference. You can really see Babcock's influence on this team because they're really careful with the puck when they lead in the third period. And last night, Game 3, I mean, what did the Bergeron line do, especially late? You know, they were really bottled up. And that
when did they arrive at the arena, actually?
Yeah, well,
it seemed like they got a late start.
Yeah, about 9:20 p.m. right? You know, and that was all about tactics and adjustments, which are the marks of a team that is really on a steep learning curve, and I think Toronto's on that. And it's going to be incumbent upon Boston to raise its game, and if the Leafs keep raising theirs, you know, do the math.
There's the old story that a lot of people tell about Gretzky's Oilers when they walked by the New York Islanders dressing room, and they saw the ice bags and the guys that had won 4 straight cups, and they learned this is the sacrifice. You can go back to Jordan's Bulls, who got their asses kicked by the Detroit Pistons. So before that, is what you're saying that you're seeing that the Leafs may have learned to have won by losing to an arch nemesis like the Bruins?
Do the Bruins win the 2011 Stanley Cup without getting had their doors blown off after being up 3-0 against Philly in 2010? I doubt it, because they incorporated that
hard lesson
into their game, and instead of hanging their heads, they said, we're going to use it to go forward. You know, you can use an even more recent example, the University of Virginia in the college basketball tournament. I mean, a 1 getting bounced by a 16 in the first round, that was humiliating. That could have destroyed the program. Instead, they put together a miraculous run and won it all. And I think that well-coached, maturing and mature teams incorporate the losses. You know, I had a chance meeting with Sean Thornton on one of those Florida trips, and he said, you learn more from losing than you do from winning. And if you're really paying attention and devoted to your craft, you know, you have to buy in, because, you know, it's heartbreaking. But if you do buy in, it makes you better as a team and better as an individual.
As we've talked about already on the show, the whistle was a bit tighter last night in this game.
Yeah.
Did Game 2 affect Game 3 and how it was officiated?
Yeah, and I think it did. And, you know, I had a few laughs looking at social media running up to the game. Because,
it's always so funny, Jack.
Because somebody took a snapshot of Chris Rooney's birthplace, which is Boston, Massachusetts, and said, oh, look who's going to be one of the refs in the Bruins game tonight. Well, you know, Rooney's refereed at the highest levels of the game. He called the Stanley Cup final, and, you know, he's been around. And if you're an observer of Bruins games, Rooney's track record is to go out of his way to make sure that everybody knows, even though he was born in Boston, he's going to call it straight. And he calls a really strict game. And I thought the game was well officiated. I thought it was time to bring the temperature down a little bit. And I thought it actually got into the Bergeron line's heads a little bit on their first few attempting to set the tone shifts of the game where they were not, you weren't seeing Pasternak flying into guys. You weren't seeing Marchand take chances in the neutral zone.
Jake had a quieter game.
Yeah, he certainly did. He might be a little banged up, I don't know. But, yeah, that's, the muting effect. And the Bruins needed to find their B game because they didn't have it on the first line, their A game. The Charlie Coyle line certainly didn't play as well in Game 3 as it did in Game 2. And you have to tip your cap to the Toronto Maple Leafs because tactically they were more ready for an advancement of this series than the Bruins were.
Is there any other series that is more affected by the way the game is officiated than this one? Because it would seem to me that the Leafs, if it's being called tight, have the advantage. And if they let them go like they did in Game 2, that is a distinct advantage to the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't really considered comparing the Bruins-Leafs series to other ones. But, yeah, certainly the Bruins would like to play more toward old-time hockey, where you can bloody a guy and that's just a good hit. Yeah. And in today's game, if you bloody a guy, you're going to get some time and maybe even tossed out. So,
Tuukka Rask. A couple things. One, what did you make of the Tavares moment last night where it looked like he was in a bit of trouble considering his injury history?
Yeah.
A lot of people were going down that road, and just generally this season, because it's been an up and down year for Tuukka. What does he need to be better in this series for the team, do you think?
I once played for a soccer coach who said if our goalie has to touch the ball, it's only because 10 guys in front of him have made mistakes. And, it was a rhetorical statement. But I don't think Tuukka has been culpable for either of the losses. I think that the territorial advantage that Toronto has exploited in games 1 and 3 is more of a determining factor. Tuukka's got to live with the 17.7 seconds at the end of Game 6 of the 2013 Cup Final for the rest of his life. That's his Bill Buckner moment. And whether either of those two goals were his fault, he's on the hook forever in Boston for that until he wins the Stanley Cup. And that's the mistake of history of following a legend, which Tim Thomas still is. Right. And that's just the situation Tuukka's in. I think Tuukka has played okay. He and the rest of the Bruins need to play their A games the rest of the way out because nobody can forecast this series, but I don't see Toronto losing more than 2 in a row here. It's going to be a battle. I thought it would go 6 or 7 at the beginning of the series, and I still feel that way. And Tuukka's going to have to play at his best if the Bruins are going to come out ahead.
Yeah, don't tell Leaf fans that because history has taught them that they can't feel safe in any way, shape, or form, especially against the Boston. Are you surprised Tuukka didn't come out of that game when he got the hit to the head?
I was at first. Yeah. But reading his reactions, he had a stinger in one of his arms, and he said he couldn't feel it fully for 10 to 15 seconds, and that was what Don Del Negro, the trainer, was asking him about. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, it wasn't his head. It's funny because McAvoy knocked a Ranger into Rask, leading to a concussion earlier this season.
Hey, Charlie, relax.
And but really, as a defenseman, there was nowhere for McAvoy to go otherwise, other than just leave Tavares alone, which you're not going to do, because that's where Tavares makes his money, right? That's where he does his damage, right in front of the goal. So, McAvoy did what he could, but unfortunately, he knocked a 200-pound guy into his own goaltender.
What'd you make of the Kadri suspension?
I thought it was a little weird, and I think that player safety continues to put obstacles in its path as it tries to establish what will undoubtedly be legal precedent in hockey terms, because every time a guy gets 3 games in the playoffs now, people on the other side are going to say, well, why not 3 to 5, right? Because there's that variable. How about just a number of games? And if it's 5, it's 5. And should the Leafs close this thing out in 5 games, 2 games would carry over. If the Leafs were to get eliminated before the 5-game suspension ran its course in the playoffs, a couple of games next season. Yeah. But, that's what player safety chose to do. But every time they introduce a new variable.
Right.
It just feeds the fire of shows like this and where we can bat it around, right?
I mean, we hate when things fuel the fire here. It's our food, Jack.
Puts the roof
It's our
over
food.
your head.
I can't, I mean, game 4 tomorrow night, Leafs Bruins. I can't help but bring up Tampa while you're here. Because you've seen as much as them as any other non-Tampa team in the division. It was always the feeling of, all right, Leafs Bruins are going to have a go against 6-7 games, tough series.
Yeah.
Then they're really going to have a chore in front of them. How is that narrative changing? And if you're the Leafs or the Bruins, how do you not, as a human being, just look at the other side of that bracket and go, well, that's rather unexpected?
Yeah, well, speaking metaphorically, the Bruins lost Zdeno Chara for an extended period and Patrice Bergeron for an extended period in consecutive games against Colorado and Dallas on an early season road trip. They found a way to go 9-6-1 without both of those guys, which seemed an impossible achievement at the time. I thought it was going to severely change the trajectory of the team for the entire season. But the Bruins managed to find guys who could plug themselves in and find a different way to win. I don't know if Tampa Bay ever this season has had to find a different way to win. And John Tortorella hockey is punchy in the nose hockey. You know, it's the old Mike Tyson saying, everybody's got a plan until he gets punched in the nose. Well, you know, Tampa Bay is undergoing adversity. Hedman is not right, and they're off kilter, and they're quite off balance emotionally, and they haven't gone through this. And Columbus, Kekalainen looks like a genius right now when he looked as if he ought to be putting his house on the market 2.5 weeks ago, right?
Yeah. It is unbelievable to think how that door could open for both of those teams. And then, God forbid, Carolina gets on a run here. I mean, they look good after a certain fight.
Phobie keeps punching people in the face, and they get some inspiration from that topic for.
I describe Jack Edwards as a passionate play-by-play guy for a passionate team and a passionate fan base. Whatever side you're on, we at this show respect one that you come on and respect the job that you do because you're working for one of the most passionate fan bases and teams in the National Hockey League.
Well, thank you. And everybody should know that I'm on a regional network. You know,
Yes,
I did I did the ESPN thing for 12 years, and you have to call it right down the middle. But I grew up crying into my pillow while Jean Beliveau was doing this. You know, the Bruins were the second best team during the Montreal dynasty, but they couldn't get out of the division. You know, they couldn't get past Montreal. And when I got the Bruins job, it was just the meeting of a media environment where things were becoming more forgiving in a partisan sense. And I was just playing to my emotions and my lifelong love. So for me, it's been a perfect match. I don't really apologize to the people who were offended by it, but you have options. Right?
Hey, I never apologize for passion on this show. We always love passion, no matter which way it goes, because it's sometimes fed towards us as well.
Yes, but it's okay because I'm usually right. Are you calling a Game 7 next week, yes or no? You calling a Game 7?
We don't know, but I think so.
All right.
Yeah, well, it depends. NBC can take certain games from us, but if it goes 7, I think.
Oh, sorry, I was talking in a general sense. Are you going to be in a building in Boston? I don't know, TD Garden. Next week, calling a Game 7.
If the Bruins improve their game, I'm calling a Game 7. If the Bruins don't, things are going to be pretty happy in Toronto.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting. Jack Edwards, he's really good at his job. He likes us, so that's why we invite him.